The first thing he felt was silence, a silence so deep that it pressed against his ears like a heavy stone. His eyelids fluttered open slowly, revealing a faint, cold light. It was not the sun he remembered, nor the familiar glow of artificial lights from bustling cities. The light was pale, almost eerie, reflecting off smooth metal walls that seemed to stretch endlessly. He tried to move, but his muscles were weak, stiff from years of inactivity. Every limb protested as he pushed himself up, his fingers brushing against the cold surface beneath him. The air smelled faintly of iron and ozone, a scent that reminded him of machines, not life. For a moment he could not remember where he was. Memories stirred slowly, flashes of a life that seemed far away as if it belonged to someone else. Then it hit him. The stasis chamber. The last thing he remembered was lying in the pod, expecting to wake in a few years, not thousands of years. How long? He whispered to himself, his voice cracking. The sound echoed oddly in the empty space. He tried to recall the exact number, but his mind was foggy. His fingers traced the console beside him, searching for a screen, a clock, something to tell him the truth. The numbers were clear. 15,000 years. 15,000 years. Humanity gone! Panic surged. He leapt out of the pod, stumbling, heart racing. Outside, a corridor stretched before him, dimly lit by flickering panels. Dust covered everything, and the air was thick with the weight of centuries. Every step he took seemed louder than it should have been, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When he finally reached the outer doors, he paused. Beyond them lay a city, or at least what used to be a city. Towers rose like jagged teeth into the pale sky, their glass facades shattered, metal skeletons exposed. Streets were cracked, plants breaking through asphalt, reclaiming what humans had once dominated. Vehicles lay abandoned, some toppled, some rusted into immobility. He swallowed hard. The thought hit him like a punch. He was alone. He wandered through the streets slowly, eyes scanning for any sign of life. The wind whispered through empty buildings, carrying with it the smell of decay and earth. He called out, his voice trembling. "Hello, anyone?" Nothing answered. Only the echoes returned, mocking him with their emptiness. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time felt strange in this silent world. He searched buildings, scanning for supplies, for clues, anything that could explain what had happened. What he found were remnants, scraps of human history scattered across the ruins. Digital tablets flickered weakly, showing fragments of data. Books lay in piles, pages yellowed and curling, their words frozen in time. As he read, a story began to emerge. Humanity had grown, reached the stars, explored beyond the solar system. There were records of colonies, of achievements, of great discoveries. But then something changed. There were warnings, logs of strange lights in the sky, unexplained disappearances, experiments that went wrong. Panic and fear had gripped the population. And then, nothing, no explanation survived intact. Only fragments, pieces of a puzzle he could not yet solve. The silence was broken only by strange sounds, faint mechanical hums, the occasional creak of metal shifting in the wind, and once a distant rumble that made him freeze. He was not sure if it was natural or if something else moved in the shadows. Something watching. Despite fear, he pressed on. He had to understand. He had to know why humanity had vanished. Every corner he turned revealed more evidence of the world that once was. Parks overgrown with trees, monuments cracked and leaning, murals faded but still telling stories of courage, art, and love. He found a stadium half collapsed. The field now wild with grass and flowers. A scoreboard hung crookedly, frozen on a game played long ago. He imagined the cheers that once filled this place, the excitement, the laughter, the human spirit in its fullest. The contrast was painful. At night, the sky was different too. The stars seemed closer, sharper, almost artificial. He realized the sun was dimmer, somehow distant. Perhaps centuries of changes had altered the planet. He felt small beneath it, insignificant but also determined. Humanity might have vanished, but he was alive, and if there was even a faint chance, he would uncover the truth. In a library, he discovered the first real clue. Hidden among piles of dust-covered data cores was a record marked Emergency Archive, Human Survival. His heart pounded as he activated the terminal. Images flickered to life, maps, locations, messages encrypted in layers of code. They hinted at something extraordinary. Humans might not be entirely gone. Some had prepared, hiding, surviving in ways he could scarcely imagine. The thought was a spark in the darkness, For the first time since waking, hope stirred within him. He traced the maps with trembling fingers, memorizing coordinates and landmarks. Somewhere out there, humanity might still exist, waiting. But then a sound shattered his thoughts, a low mechanical clatter echoing from the streets outside. He froze, listening. It was deliberate, not random. He moved closer to the window, peering into the night. In the dim light, he saw shapes moving. Machines, creatures? He could not tell. They seemed aware, scanning, searching. Fear gripped him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He remembered the ingenuity of humans, the way they had survived against impossible odds for millennia. If anything could help him now, it was his mind, his skill, and his courage. He packed what supplies he could find, food rations, a portable power unit, tools, and a few weapons he barely remembered how to use. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped out into the night. The city loomed silent around him, but now it was no longer just ruins. It was a puzzle, a challenge, a warning. Every shadow could hide danger. Every building could contain secrets. But he was ready. He whispered to himself as he walked through the empty streets, "If humanity has been erased, I will find a way to bring it back. Or at least, I will survive." Above, the sky seemed to watch him, stars glimmering coldly in the distance. The wind carried an unfamiliar scent, as if the planet itself had changed while he slept. And somewhere, far beyond the horizon, something stirred, something that had been waiting. He did not know what it was yet. But he would learn because he was human, and humans never give up. The night was colder than he expected. Shadows stretched like dark fingers across the crumbled streets, and the pale light of the distant sun barely touched the tops of the ruined buildings. He moved cautiously, every step careful, his senses alert. He had learned quickly that silence could be dangerous. The faint hums and distant mechanical clatters from the city were not comforting. They were warnings. He found himself standing in what used to be a main square. A fountain, once proud and polished, had cracked, and water had long since disappeared. Vines twisted up broken statues, covering the faces of heroes who had once been celebrated by humanity. He ran his fingers across the cold stone, imagining the lives these people had lived, the laughter and joy that had filled the square. It was a world frozen in time. Moving forward, he entered a nearby building. It was tall, once filled with offices and laboratories. Papers and files were scattered across the floor. Dust covered every surface. Yet there was evidence that someone or something had been here after humans vanished. Footprints in the dust, mechanical tracks pressed into the floor, and strange symbols painted on the walls. He crouched, examining the markings. They were unlike anything he had seen before, geometric, precise, yet not human. His mind raced. Who or what had made these signs? And why? A shiver ran down his spine. Humanity was gone, yes, but the planet was not empty. Something had arrived after them, leaving traces that were small but deliberate. He pressed on, determined to find answers. The building had multiple levels, staircases leading down into shadowed basements. He descended slowly, holding a small light. The air grew colder, heavier. Here he found old digital terminals, still faintly glowing, some barely functioning. He tapped the nearest screen and a holographic projection flickered to life. It was a map of the planet, or at least part of it. Several points were marked in bright green, connected by lines forming a network. One point pulsed gently. He stepped closer. Text scrolled across the screen in languages long forgotten, but he could read fragments. Emergency archive, human survival, coordinates, stasis. His heart raced. Some humans had survived, hidden, preserved. Maybe they were waiting somewhere out of reach, alive. A new hope burned inside him. But along with hope came fear. If they survived, why had they not returned? And what had destroyed the rest of humanity? He stored the map in a portable device, careful to memorize as much as possible. Then from the far end of the basement he heard it again, a low metallic clatter, deliberate and measured. He froze, listening. Footsteps, machines. He could not tell. Slowly he raised his makeshift weapon, a tool he had adapted from the remnants of old technology. The sound grew closer. Shadows shifted at the edges of his light. He strained his eyes, trying to see the source. Then he saw it, a machine moving with careful precision, scanning the walls, scanning him. Its shape was unlike any vehicle he had ever seen. Metallic, multi-limbed, with glowing sensors that traced patterns across the room. It paused, tilted slightly, and then moved on. His pulse slowed only slightly. He realized it was studying the environment, not attacking, but still danger lurked. He had no choice but to be careful. Humans had survived because they were clever, resourceful, and aware. If he wanted to survive, he would need the same. He retreated from the basement, moving to higher levels where sunlight filtered weakly through broken windows. Dust danced in the light, creating patterns that looked almost like memories frozen in midair. He explored the upper floors, finding remnants of laboratories, shelves filled with equipment long unused, containers marked with chemical symbols he could not recognize. Each artifact told a story of human curiosity and ambition, machines designed to explore the stars, experiments in biology, tools for construction and defense. Amid the ruins, he found personal items. A child's toy cracked and faded, a photograph half-burned, showing people laughing, arms around each other, a journal, pages brittle and filled with handwritten notes about daily life, hopes, and fears. He read a few entries aloud, his voice trembling. These were the lives that had disappeared. The world was empty, but their stories remained. As he left the building, he noticed the sky changing. Clouds formed in unnatural patterns, swirling as if guided by an unseen hand. Lightning streaked across the horizon, but there was no thunder, just the bright, violent light. It made him pause, a cold fear running through him. The world had changed while he slept. The planet he knew was gone. He walked through streets where trees had broken through concrete, roots twisting across broken cars. Nature had returned, reclaiming what humans once dominated. Birds, some strange, mutated creatures, moved cautiously, observing him from branches. Despite the fear and desolation, he could not help but marvel at the persistence of life. Even after 15,000 years, the planet continued, indifferent to humanity's absence. Eventually, he reached the remains of a research facility. The doors were twisted and scorched, yet inside he found what he hoped for: stasis pods. Rows upon rows of them, some empty, some damaged, others still intact. His breath caught. Perhaps this was where humans had hidden. Perhaps some were still alive, waiting. He ran his fingers along the nearest pod. A faint hum indicated power, just enough to keep something in stasis. Could it be? Could humanity truly have survived? A mix of fear and hope gripped him. He knew he had to try, had to awaken whoever might still exist here. But then the ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling as a distant roar echoed through the facility. Machines, buildings, or something else, it did not matter. Danger was near. He glanced at the pods. He could not stay here long. Decisions had to be made quickly. He memorized the locations of the functional pods, hoping to return safely. He exited the building just as a faint glow appeared on the horizon, green, pulsating, moving slowly. He squinted. Could it be some form of communication? A beacon? Or another machine patrolling the ruins? His instincts told him both. He had to move carefully, yet he also had to explore. He had no other choice. The night stretched long. He camped in the shadows of a crumbling tower, using what remained of his supplies. Every sound made him tense, every shadow made him alert. Sleep came only in short bursts filled with dreams of the past, of humanity, of families and friends lost to time. When he woke, he pressed on, driven by curiosity, fear, and hope alike. By the time dawn approached, he had reached the outskirts of the city. There, the landscape changed. The ruins gave way to wildlands, forests twisted and dense, rivers flowing where streets once ran, and beyond them, mountains rose, jagged and dark against the pale sky. Somewhere in those mountains, the map he had discovered hinted at human survival, hidden bunkers or secret colonies. A determination filled him. He would go there. He would find survivors if they existed, and if humanity had been erased completely, he would at least uncover the truth. The world had changed, but he had awakened to a challenge, one that required courage, intelligence, and the persistence of the human spirit. As he took his first steps into the wildlands, the strange green light on the horizon pulsed once more, then disappeared behind a ridge. He did not know if it was a threat or a sign, but it had captured his attention. Whatever awaited him in the ruins, in the forest, in the mountains, he knew one thing: humanity may have vanished, but he was human. And humans never stopped searching. The journey ahead would test him in ways he could not imagine. Machines, altered creatures, and perhaps even alien intelligence waited somewhere beyond the horizon. But he had survived 15,000 years of silence. He would survive whatever came next, because survival was what humans did best. The forest stretched endlessly before him, thick with twisted trees and vines that reached across broken roads and crumbling ruins. Every step was uncertain. Roots threatened to trip him, and the shadows between trunks seemed to move as if alive. He gripped his makeshift weapon tightly, scanning every flicker of motion. This was no longer a quiet city. It was a wild world, and something in the air whispered danger. The green light from the horizon had vanished, but he felt its presence lingering, like eyes watching from afar. He moved carefully, following the coordinates from the map he had found in the stasis facility. The path was treacherous, overgrown, and alien in appearance. Birds with strange, iridescent feathers flitted overhead, and small creatures scurried among the underbrush, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Hours passed, and exhaustion weighed on him. He paused beside a stream to drink, letting the cool water soothe his parched throat. As he rested, he reflected on the map's points. They hinted at bunkers, underground shelters, and places where humans might have survived. Some were close, some were far, hidden behind mountains or deep in forests. The journey would be long, but it was the only hope he had left. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath him. He dropped to all fours, heart pounding as a deep mechanical roar echoed through the forest. Trees shook violently and branches snapped. He froze, listening. From the shadows emerged machines, tall, spindly constructs with glowing red sensors and moving limbs. They scanned the area, pausing occasionally as if analyzing everything around them. He ducked behind a fallen tree, barely daring to breathe. The machines moved systematically, sweeping the forest in search of something. Perhaps they were patrolling, searching for signs of life. Perhaps they were hunting. He could not be sure, but one thing was certain. They were intelligent, precise, and dangerous. He waited until they moved on, then continued cautiously, keeping low and silent. The forest seemed alive with whispers and subtle movements. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made him jump. Yet, despite the fear, he pushed forward. Humanity had survived worse. If he wanted to find survivors, he had to keep moving. As night fell, he found a small clearing and decided to camp. He built a makeshift shelter from branches and leaves, trying to remain hidden. He checked the map again, tracing the path toward a marked point that indicated a potential bunker. It was deep in the mountains, far beyond the forest, but it might hold answers or even survivors. Sleep came fitfully. In dreams, he saw flashes of the past, cities alive with people, families laughing, children playing. Then the cities crumbled and shadows rose, machines patrolled, and humanity disappeared. He woke with a start, sweat on his brow, heart racing. The forest outside was quiet now, but he knew it was only temporary. Danger waited, patient and silent. The next morning, he set out early. The path became steeper, and the forest grew darker as he approached the mountains. Strange formations of rock jutted out like teeth, and deep chasms split the earth. It was hard to navigate, but he moved carefully, using tools he had scavenged to climb and secure footholds. Midway through the climb, he stumbled upon a structure hidden among the rocks, a half-buried entrance, metallic and smooth, unlike the crumbling ruins he had seen before. It was a bunker, just as the map suggested. The door was sealed but not locked. He pushed it open cautiously, the hinges groaning under his weight. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. Dust covered everything, yet signs of recent activity were visible, footprints, tools, and remnants of supplies. His heart raced. Perhaps someone had been here recently. Perhaps humans were still alive. He explored carefully, checking every corner. In one room, he found a small terminal. It flickered weakly, but he managed to activate it. Files appeared, records of humans who had survived the initial catastrophe. Some had hidden in these bunkers for generations, using technology to remain undetected. Others had moved farther away, seeking safety in distant lands. A sense of hope filled him. Humanity had not completely vanished. Survivors existed, hidden, waiting for someone like him. He scanned the records, memorizing locations and details. This information could save lives, perhaps even restore humanity's presence on the planet. But before he could dwell on hope, a noise echoed from deeper inside the bunker. Metal scraping against metal, deliberate and slow. He crouched behind a supply crate, peering into the shadows. Machines, more of them. The same type he had seen in the forest, now inside, exploring. Their sensors glowed red, scanning every corner. He realized that the machines were not random. They were searching specifically for life, for survivors. He had to act quickly. Using his knowledge of the environment, he set traps with debris and tools. A well-aimed rock triggered a chain reaction, creating noise in a different corridor. The machines turned, investigating the distraction, giving him time to slip past them and deeper into the bunker. In the next chamber, he found something extraordinary, a stasis pod, smaller and more advanced than the ones in the city facility. A faint hum indicated it was still active. Could it contain a human survivor? His hands shook as he examined the controls. The pod displayed a life sign, weak but present. Someone had survived, preserved for thousands of years. He hesitated. Activating the pod could be dangerous. The person inside might be fragile, or the machines could detect the energy spike. But he had no choice. Hope demanded action. He pressed the sequence to awaken the occupant. The pod hissed, lights flickered, and the sealed chamber opened slowly. Inside was a woman, her features delicate, her hair long and silvered by time and stasis. She opened her eyes, confusion and fear evident. He spoke softly, trying to calm her. "You're safe. You're alive. I'm here to help." She stared at him for a long moment, trying to process his presence. Then recognition flashed in her eyes. "I thought I was alone," she whispered. "You were," he said gently, "but not anymore. There may be others and we need to find them." Together, they moved carefully through the bunker, avoiding the machines that patrolled relentlessly. The woman, whose name was Alara, shared what she knew. The machines had arrived after humanity had expanded across the stars. They had hunted survivors, destroyed cities, and left the planet in ruins. Some humans had escaped to hidden bunkers while others had been captured or killed. He listened intently. Every detail mattered. Every fact could help them survive and perhaps fight back. Humans were clever, adaptable, and determined. If anyone could outsmart the machines, it was them. Alara led him to a secondary map, showing hidden paths through the mountains and forests, safe routes that avoided machine patrols. Their journey would be long and dangerous, but now, with hope renewed, they were not alone. As they prepared to leave the bunker, a distant roar shook the ground. Machines were approaching, faster and more numerous than before. They had been detected. Every step forward would now require courage, strategy, and the full measure of human ingenuity. They moved silently, using the terrain to their advantage, climbing rocks, hiding in shadows, and avoiding the machine's sensors. The mountains stretched endlessly, but they had a goal. A location marked on the map as a potential human stronghold, a place where survivors had gathered and, perhaps, a way to reclaim the planet. Night fell again and they found shelter in a small cave. Around the fire, they shared stories of humanity's past, of families lost, of cities built and destroyed, and of the unyielding human spirit that had survived through generations. Despite the danger, they found comfort in each other's presence. The stars above seemed brighter here, clear and sharp, as if reminding them that life still endured. They were small, fragile, and alone, but alive. And alive was enough to begin the fight to reclaim what was lost. As they lay resting, listening to the wind through the mountains, they made a silent promise they would find the hidden humans, protect them, and one day restore humanity's place on the planet. The machines were relentless, the world had changed, but humans were clever, resourceful, and persistent. They would not give up, because survival was what humans did best, and humans never stopped fighting. The morning light filtered through cracks in the mountain cliffs, casting streaks of gold across the rocky landscape. He and Alara had moved carefully through the night, avoiding machine patrols, using every shadow and crevice to remain unseen. Their muscles ached from climbing and crouching, and their supplies were limited, but they pressed on. Every step brought them closer to the hidden stronghold of human survivors. The terrain was harsh. Jagged rocks tore at their clothing, and sudden drops forced them to take slow, careful steps. Forests rose like walls on either side, thick with undergrowth and strange creatures that observed silently from the shadows. Despite the danger, he felt a spark of hope. They were not alone anymore, and now, with Alara at his side, he had someone to share both the burden and the determination. As they approached a narrow valley, they spotted movement ahead. Red lights glinted between the trees, machines patrolling the paths that led to the mountain passes. They froze, pressed against the rocks, and watched. The machines moved in calculated patterns, scanning systematically. One misstep could alert them, and if that happened, the patrol would call more machines to the area. Ilara whispered, her voice tight with tension. "We need to create a diversion." He nodded, scanning the environment. Broken rocks, dry branches, and loose stones were all around. Using a simple tool, he created a small trap that would roll down the slope when triggered, making a loud clatter far from their path. When the machines detected the noise, they turned toward it, moving away from the pass. They waited, hearts pounding, then slipped silently past, careful not to leave any trace. Hours later, they reached the entrance to a hidden canyon. The map had marked this area as a safe path toward the stronghold. The walls rose high, carved by centuries of erosion, and the canyon narrowed to a path just wide enough for two people to pass side by side. The air was cooler here, fresher, and for a brief moment the danger seemed distant. But safety was temporary. As they moved deeper into the canyon, a faint vibration ran through the ground. Machines, dozens of them, moving in formation, scanning the landscape below. The canyon offered no room to hide or escape. He and Ilara ducked into a small recess, their bodies pressed against the cold rock. He whispered, "We need a plan. We can't outrun them. We have to be smarter." Ilara nodded, eyes sharp. "We can use the terrain, make them fall behind, lead them where we want them." Together they devised a simple strategy. He pushed boulders down narrow sections of the canyon, creating obstacles that slowed the machines. Ilara directed smaller rocks to roll and make noise in different directions, confusing the patrols. One by one, the machines fell into traps or became blocked by fallen rocks. The canyon, once a trap, became a tool. By midday, the last machine had been delayed enough for them to escape the canyon entirely. Both were exhausted, muscles screaming, but alive. Ahead, the mountains opened to a plateau, revealing a valley that looked almost untouched by the machines. Trees grew in neat clusters, and in the distance, structures rose that were different from the ruins they had seen, carefully constructed, reinforced, and clearly inhabited. He stopped and breathed deeply. "The stronghold," he whispered. "We made it." As they approached, the humans inside noticed them immediately. Figures moved quickly to meet them, armed but cautious. Faces were wary, but curiosity and relief shone through. The survivors had lived in fear for generations, always hiding, always watching the skies for the red glow of the machine's sensors. Now they saw not just a human, but hope. The leaders stepped forward. A woman, older than Ilara but strong, her eyes sharp and intelligent, addressed them. "Who are you? How did you get past the patrols?" He explained briefly, careful to convey the urgency without giving unnecessary detail. "We have information," he said. "Maps, locations of other bunkers, and survivors. Humanity still has a chance if we act together." The leader's eyes softened slightly. "Then you are the first to return with hope in generations." She motioned for them to follow. Inside the stronghold, the valley was filled with structures hidden among trees and rocks, powered by solar arrays and old generators. Gardens had been cultivated for food, and workshops were scattered throughout. Humans moved efficiently, alert but not panicked, a community surviving against impossible odds. Ilara and he shared the information they had collected. The maps, the stasis pod records, the locations of other potential survivors, all of it. The leader studied the maps carefully, nodding. "If this is true, we could connect with other humans, rebuild, retake the planet." But hope was tempered by caution. The machines were relentless. They adapted, learned, and struck without warning. Any plan required intelligence, strategy, and coordination, and so they began to prepare. Over the next days, they trained, explored, and fortified the stronghold. Humans worked together, combining their knowledge and skills. They repaired old machines, modified tools, and created early warning systems. The canyon strategy had taught them one truth: humans could outthink machines, even if they could not match their speed or strength. He and Ilara led reconnaissance missions. Each mission tested their ingenuity, their courage, and their ability to think under pressure. They discovered small machine outposts, scavenged supplies, and mapped patrol patterns. Every success strengthened morale. Every mistake reminded them of the stakes. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, he stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. Ilara joined him, silent for a moment. "Do you ever wonder," she said softly, "if humans can truly reclaim what was lost?" He looked at the horizon, at the forests and mountains beyond, and nodded slowly. We don't have a choice. We survive, we adapt, we fight. That is what humans do. The next day, the first offensive was planned. They would strike a machine patrol that threatened a nearby bunker. It was a small victory, but it was a statement. Humans would no longer hide. Using traps, decoys, and coordinated attacks, they disrupted the patrol, proving that strategy and intelligence could overcome raw power. News of the success spread quickly through the stronghold. Spirits lifted. The survivors realized that humans were not just victims of time or machines. They were thinkers, innovators, and fighters. This was the essence of the human spirit. Yet danger remained. Scouts reported larger machine formations moving toward the valley, testing defenses, adapting to previous tactics. The real challenge was coming, a threat that would test every skill, every plan, every ounce of courage. At night, he and Alara sat by a small fire. "We've shown them we can fight," she said quietly. "But the machines will learn. We need something more, something they cannot predict." He nodded, thinking, "We need to be unpredictable, creative. We need to use every lesson humanity has learned in its history. Strategy, technology, imagination. That is our advantage. That is what makes us human." The fire crackled, shadows dancing across their faces. They were tired but ready. The stronghold had become more than a refuge, it was a symbol, a beacon for humanity. And now it was time to plan the next steps, connecting with other survivors, fortifying defenses, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the machines that had erased nearly all of humanity. The mountains loomed in the distance, jagged and imposing. Beyond them lay unknown dangers, but also hope, hidden pockets of life, and the possibility of rebuilding a world that had been lost for 15,000 years. And as he looked up at the stars, he whispered to himself, "Humanity may have fallen, but it is not finished. We rise, we fight, and we endure. That is who we are, because humans were clever. Humans were resourceful. Humans never stopped striving, and now they would prove it." The valley was quiet before dawn, but the air was thick with tension. The survivors moved silently, checking weapons, adjusting traps, and reviewing plans one last time. The machines had learned from previous encounters. This next confrontation would be the most dangerous yet. Every human here knew that the battle would not only test their strength, but also their intelligence, their creativity, and their determination. He stood at the edge of the stronghold, looking at the distant tree line. Beyond it, the machines would soon emerge, relentless and precise. Ilara approached, carrying supplies and nodding to him. "Are we ready?" she asked. He nodded, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. "We don't have to outrun them. We have to outthink them. That is our advantage. That is what makes us human." Together they moved through the stronghold, giving last-minute instructions, ensuring every trap, every path, and every decoy was in place. Humans had learned to work as one, each individual using their skills to strengthen the group. Engineers adjusted sensors, scouts positioned themselves at vantage points, and leaders coordinated signals to communicate silently. Then, just as the sun began to rise, the first machines appeared. Tall, angular, with glowing red sensors moving in calculated patterns, they scanned the landscape with precision. The valley seemed to hold its breath. The humans waited. He pressed a small button on a control panel. Rocks and debris rolled down preset channels, creating loud noises that drew the first group of machines into traps. Explosions of dust and collapsing barriers slowed them down. The machines adapted, but the humans had prepared for that. Every move they made had a counter, every advance anticipated. Ilara led a team along a flanking route. They set decoys, luring another group of machines into a narrow pass where automated devices disabled their movements. Humans moved silently among the shadows, using agility and intelligence to outmaneuver brute force. For the first time in thousands of years, humans were not running. They were taking control. Hours passed in a tense, careful dance. The machines struck again and again, but the humans held their ground. They repaired damaged defenses on the fly, redirected power to key areas, and coordinated attacks that confused and delayed the mechanical forces. Every success, no matter how small, was celebrated quietly, a reminder that ingenuity could overcome strength. At midday, he and Ilara reached the outer perimeter. A larger group of machines was advancing, stronger, faster, and more numerous. These were not ordinary patrols, they were advanced units designed to eliminate any threat. The humans could not match them directly. Strategy was the only option. He studied the terrain, The mountains provided natural choke points, and the forests could conceal movements. Using signals, he coordinated with scouts and teams inside the valley. They set traps in layers, forcing the machines into confined areas where humans could attack from multiple directions. The first clash was fierce. Machines lunged with precision, but the humans anticipated every move. They used ropes, pulleys, and simple mechanical devices to trip and disable them. Sparks flew, metal screeched, and smoke filled the air, but humans adapted quickly, working together seamlessly. Ilara fought beside him, quick and precise. Together they took down multiple machines, guiding them into traps or disabling them with makeshift tools. The humans shouted commands, signaling teams to shift positions, redirect forces, and exploit openings. It was not brute strength that won the day. It was thought, coordination, and courage. By late afternoon, the machines were retreating, their formation broken. Some were destroyed, others trapped, and a few fled into the distant forests. The humans stood among the smoke and debris, exhausted but victorious. For the first time in thousands of years, humanity had struck back successfully. The valley erupted with cautious cheers. Survivors hugged one another, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Children peeked out from behind barricades, witnessing a victory that had once seemed impossible. The stronghold had endured and hope had returned, but victory was only the beginning. He knew that this battle had not ended the threat. Machines remained, and other dangers still lurked across the world. They would have to be clever, resourceful, and united if humanity was to reclaim the planet. That night, as the survivors gathered around fires, he addressed the group. Today we fought not just to survive, but to show that humans are resilient. We are intelligent, we adapt, and we do not give up. The world may have been lost to us, but it can be reclaimed. Together we will rebuild. Together we will rise. Ilara stood beside him, nodding. We are not just surviving. We are proving that humanity cannot be erased. Our minds, our spirit, our determination, these are stronger than any machine. Plans were made for the coming days. Teams would venture out to locate other bunkers, gather survivors, and strengthen defenses. Engineers worked on improving weapons and tools, using knowledge preserved for generations. Scouts explored distant forests, mapping terrain and observing machine movements. Every human in the stronghold contributed to a common goal: survival and the revival of humanity. Over time, more survivors emerged from hidden bunkers, caves, and underground shelters. They arrived cautiously, afraid but inspired by the courage of those already in the stronghold. Each new arrival was welcomed, fed, and integrated into the community. The network of human survivors slowly grew, like seeds taking root in the earth after a long winter. The machines adapted, but so did the humans. They learned to anticipate movements, set advanced traps, and create false signals. They developed strategies that leveraged creativity, intuition, and unpredictability, the qualities that made humans unique. Months passed, and the survivors' confidence grew. Small victories became larger ones. Machines were lured into traps that disabled entire patrols. Previously dangerous areas became safe routes. Humans reclaimed territories that had once been dominated by mechanical forces. He walked one evening with Ilara along a ridge overlooking the valley. The fires of the stronghold glowed below and the forest stretched beyond. "Look at what we've done," he said quietly. "We started with nothing but hope and determination. Now humanity is rising again." Ilara smiled, her eyes reflecting the fires below. "It is just the beginning. We will face challenges, but we are prepared. We are humans. That is our greatest strength," he nodded. Humanity had survived the impossible. 15,000 years of absence, a planet reclaimed by nature, and the machines that sought to erase them. They had endured through intelligence, courage, and the unyielding will to live. The stars above shone brighter than ever. They reminded him that life, hope, and humanity could persist even in the darkest times. The survivors in the valley were no longer victims. They were pioneers of a new beginning. In the distance, he saw movement among the mountains. Machines, yes, but also signs of other humans joining them. The network of survivors was growing, stronger with each passing day. And as he looked at the horizon, he realized that humanity's story was far from over. It was a story of survival, ingenuity, and resilience. A story of humans rising against all odds, proving that even when erased from the world, their spirit could not be extinguished. He turned to Ilara and spoke softly. "We have won battles, yes, But the real victory is showing that humanity cannot be erased. That is the legacy we leave. Ilara nodded, and together they watched the sunrise over the valley, a symbol of hope and renewal. The world was still dangerous, but humanity had returned. Machines and obstacles would continue to challenge them, but they had rediscovered something far more powerful: themselves, because humans were clever. Humans were resourceful. Humans never gave up, and now they would shape the future. The fight was not over, but humanity had awakened, and this time, they would never be erased.